Everyone in the room braced for a gunshot. Spilling scalding espresso on the chest of Manhattan's most feared man was a guaranteed death sentence, and his bodyguards already had their hands on their holsters. Yet, as the clatter of the dropped porcelain tray echoed against the imported Italian marble, the terrifying kingpin did the unthinkable instead. Julia Jenkins was not supposed to be working the VIP section that night. At 24, she was surviving on a cocktail of caffeine, adrenaline, and pure desperation. Her younger brother, Leo, was undergoing his second round of aggressive chemotherapy at Mount Sinai Hospital, and the out-of-pocket deductibles were piling up like unread mail. Working as a server at the Oak Room inside the Plaza Hotel was her only lifeline. It paid well enough, provided you didn't mind sacrificing your dignity to the wealthiest, most demanding elites of New York City. The atmosphere in the restaurant was suffocatingly tense. It was a Tuesday evening in late November, and the city outside was freezing. But inside the private mahogany-paneled alcove known as Table 8, the temperature felt like a furnace. Richard, the notoriously high-strung floor manager, was sweating profusely. He grabbed Julia's arm behind the swinging doors of the kitchen, his fingers digging into her uniform. "Listen to me, Julia," Richard hissed, his eyes darting frantically toward the dining room. "Sarah just locked herself in the employee restroom. She's having a full-blown panic attack, and I don't blame her. But Table 8 needs their after-dinner service now. You are taking it to them." Julia wiped her damp palms on her apron. "Table 8, Richard, you know I only cover the main floor. Who is even sitting back there?" "Vincent Moretti," Richard whispered, treating the name as if it were a live grenade. Julia felt the blood drain from her face. Even someone entirely disconnected from the criminal underworld knew the name Moretti. He wasn't a street-level thug. He was corporate, polished, and ruthless. The tabloids called him a real estate tycoon, but the whispering class of New York knew he controlled the shipping ports from Brooklyn to New Jersey. Men who crossed Vincent Moretti didn't end up with broken legs. Their companies were systematically dismantled, and they quietly disappeared on international flights, never to return. "He's hosting Dmitry Volkov," Richard continued, shoving a heavy, polished silver tray into Julia's hands. "The Russian oligarch. They've been at each other's throats over the shipping contracts for months. This dinner is supposed to be a peace treaty. 3 Jamaican Blue Mountain espressos. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look them in the eye. Drop the coffee and get out." Julia took a shaky breath, balancing the tray. 3 pristine porcelain cups sat on matching saucers, the dark, rich crema of the $80 a cup espresso steaming in the air. "I can do this. Just drop and go." She pushed through the swinging doors. The hum of polite society faded as she approached the private alcove. Vincent Moretti sat at the head of the table. He was younger than the rumors suggested, perhaps mid-30s, with sharp, aristocratic features, dark hair swept back, and eyes as cold as flint. He wore a bespoke charcoal Brioni suit, the subtle glint of a vintage Patek Philippe Nautilus showing beneath his cuff. On his left sat Dmitry Volkov, a massive, heavily bearded man with a fake, jovial smile. Behind them stood 4 men in tailored suits, standing as still as statues, their eyes scanning the room. Julia approached the table, her heart hammering against her ribs. Left foot, right foot. She repeated her mantra. Just pay Leo's bills. Just get through the shift. "We control the East River, Dmitry," Vincent was saying, his voice a low, smooth baritone that somehow cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant. "You are welcome to operate your freight, provided you pay the proper tariffs to the union. My union." Volkov chuckled, a wet, rough sound. You Americans, always so obsessed with paperwork. I think we can come to an arrangement, Vincent. Let us drink to it. Julia stepped up to the table. She reached out, carefully placing the first espresso in front of Volkov. Her hand trembled slightly, but the cup landed safely. She then moved to place the second cup in front of Volkov's associate. Finally, she turned to Vincent Moretti. She lifted the final porcelain cup from the silver tray. As she leaned in, one of Volkov's bodyguards shifted his weight, his heavy leather shoe stepping firmly onto the hem of Julia's long, black uniform apron. Julia tried to step back to balance herself, but she was tethered to the floor. The laws of physics took over. Her ankle twisted. The silver tray tipped violently. In agonizing slow motion, Julia watched the porcelain cup slip from the saucer. It hit the edge of the mahogany table, shattering into 3 distinct pieces. The boiling, hot, black espresso launched directly into the air, splashing across the pristine white collar of Vincent Moretti's shirt and cascading down the lapel of his $6,000 Brioni suit. The entire restaurant seemed to stop breathing. The ambient chatter of the dining room died instantly. The string quartet in the corner faltered, hitting a dissonant chord before falling dead silent. Julia hit the floor, her knees slamming into the marble, the heavy silver tray clattering loudly beside her. She gasped, staring in sheer horror at the dark, steaming stain spreading across the chest of the city's most dangerous man. For 3 agonizing seconds, absolute silence reigned in the oak room. Then chaos erupted. The 2 men standing behind Vincent moved with terrifying synchronized speed. Suit jackets flew open, and the dull metallic click of Glock 19s being drawn echoed in the alcove. Volkov's men reacted instantly, jumping to their feet, hands darting into their coats. Julia was paralyzed on the floor, her vision tunneled. This is it, she thought wildly. I'm going to die in a restaurant over a cup of coffee, and Leo is going to be left alone. I'm so sorry, Julia sobbed, her hands hovering helplessly over the shattered porcelain. I'm so sorry. He stepped on my apron. I didn't mean to— Quiet, a voice commanded. It wasn't a yell. It was softly spoken, yet it carried an authority that instantly froze the room. Vincent Moretti slowly raised his right hand, a single, elegant gesture. Instantly, his bodyguards lowered their weapons, though they did not holster them. Vincent didn't look angry. He didn't look embarrassed. His dark eyes were fixed downward, intensely focused not on Julia, but on the spilled liquid soaking into his trousers and pooling on the marble floor near Julia's knee. He slowly leaned forward. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply through his nose. Julia watched, trembling, as Vincent's jaw tightened. The scent of the roasted Jamaican coffee was strong, but beneath it, there was something else. A sharp, sickly sweet scent. Like bitter almonds. Vincent's eyes snapped open, locking on to Julia. He reached down. Julia flinched, expecting a strike, but his large hand wrapped securely around her forearm. He didn't squeeze painfully. His grip was firm, urgent. He hauled her to her feet with shocking strength, pulling her physically behind his chair, shielding her body with his own. "Did it touch you?" Vincent demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Julia blinked, disoriented. What? I'm sorry about your suit. I can pay for the dry cleaning. Did the liquid touch your skin, Julia? He asked again, reading the brass name tag pinned to her ruined uniform. No, she stammered. No, it just hit the floor. And you. Vincent nodded once. He slowly pulled a pure silk handkerchief from his pocket and methodically wiped a drop of the coffee from his jawline, never breaking eye contact with Dmitri Volkov, who was suddenly looking incredibly pale. "A peace treaty, Dmitri," Vincent said, his voice dripping with venomous calm. "That's what you called this dinner." "Vincent, it was an accident," Volkov said, holding his hands up, though his accent was suddenly thicker, betraying his nerves. "The girl is clumsy. She tripped." "She did trip," Vincent agreed softly. He tossed the stained silk handkerchief onto the table. "But I don't care about the suit. I care about the smell. Potassium cyanide. Fast-acting. Tasteless in dark espresso, but it gives off a distinct aroma when it hits the open air, doesn't it?" A collective gasp rippled through the remaining patrons, who were now scrambling out of their chairs and fleeing toward the exits. Richard, the manager, had already fainted behind the host stand. "You're crazy," Volkov spat, backing up. "You think I would poison you in a public place?" "I think," Vincent said, taking a slow step forward, "that you paid the barista to spike the cup meant for me. But you didn't account for a new waitress bringing out the tray. She didn't know which cup was meant for whom. She handed you your cup first. The spiked cup was the last one left. It was meant for me. And when your idiot bodyguard stepped on her apron to try and stop her from serving it, he inadvertently saved my life." Volkov's eyes darted towards the kitchen. It was the only tell Vincent needed. "Take them," Vincent ordered softly. The oak room exploded into violence. The suppressed thwip-thwip of gunfire shattered the elegant atmosphere. Volkov's bodyguard, the one who had stepped on Julia's apron, dropped to the marble floor instantly. Volkov flipped the heavy mahogany table, sending crystal and remaining espresso flying, using it as a shield as he scrambled blindly toward the side exit. Julia screamed, covering her ears as she dropped into a tight ball behind Vincent. She felt a heavy hand grip the back of her collar, hauling her upward once again. "Move!" Vincent barked. "I can't!" Julia cried, terrified of the crossfire. "If you stay here, Volkov's remaining men will kill you just for being in the room," Vincent said, his voice completely devoid of panic. It was terrifyingly calm. "You just ruined a $6,000 suit, Julia Jenkins. You owe me a debt, and right now, I'm collecting." Before Julia could protest, Vincent Moretti dragged her through the swinging doors of the kitchen, flanked by his two massive bodyguards. They bypassed the screaming kitchen staff, kicking open the reinforced steel doors leading to the loading dock in the back alley. The freezing November wind hit Julia like a physical blow. Idling in the alleyway was an armored, pitch-black Mercedes Maybach. One of the bodyguards yanked the rear door open. Vincent practically threw Julia into the plush leather interior before sliding in beside her. "Drive! The safe house in Tribeca," he commanded the driver. The massive car peeled out of the alley, its tires shrieking against the wet asphalt. Inside the soundproof cabin, the chaos of the gunfire vanished, replaced by the smooth hum of the V12 engine. Julia pressed herself against the opposite door, her breathing ragged, staring at the Mafia Boss sitting inches away from her. His white shirt was stained a dark, muddy brown. He was calmly unbuttoning his vest. He looked over at her, his dark eyes unreadable. "You're shaking," Vincent noted casually, as if they were discussing the weather. You just kidnapped me," Julia managed to choke out, her hands gripping the leather seats. "I have to go back. I have to go to the hospital. My brother," Vincent paused, his hands freezing on the buttons of his vest. He tilted his head, studying her intensely. "Mount Sinai, room 412, Leo Jenkins, acute lymphoblastic leukemia." Julia's heart stopped. All the air left her lungs. How do you know that? A dangerous, almost imperceptible smirk touched the corner of Vincent Moretti's mouth. Because, Julia, you spilling that coffee wasn't the first time you saved my life. And this isn't a coincidence. The armored Mercedes Maybach glided effortlessly down the FDR Drive, a silent ghost cutting through the freezing New York night. Inside, the heavy silence was punctuated only by Julia's ragged breathing. She was pressed as far into the plush leather corner as physical space allowed, her eyes locked on the terrifying man sitting opposite her. Vincent Moretti discarded his ruined, coffee-stained Brioni suit jacket onto the floorboard. He unbuttoned his cuffs, his movements precise and unhurried. "How do you know my brother's name?" Julia asked again, her voice barely above a whisper, though it shook with a fierce, protective edge. "If you touch him, I have no intention of harming a sick child, Julia," Vincent interrupted, his tone chillingly level. "In fact, at this very moment, 3 of my best men are stationed outside room 412 at Mount Sinai. They are standing next to the nurses' station. If anyone lacking a hospital badge or my explicit clearance steps off that elevator, they will be dealt with." Julia's stomach plummeted. Why are you doing this? I just spilled coffee on you." "You spilled potassium cyanide on my floor," Vincent corrected, leaning forward, the ambient streetlights illuminating the sharp angles of his face. "Volkov bought the barista. That much is obvious. He intended to poison me during a public peace summit, knowing my men wouldn't draw weapons in a crowded room if I simply slumped over from a heart attack. It was a flawless plan. Except he didn't account for the chaotic variable of a terrified waitress tripping over a shoe." The car slowed, descending into a highly secured, subterranean parking garage beneath a sleek glass-paneled high-rise on Franklin Street in Tribeca. The heavy steel doors rolled shut behind them, sealing them away from the world. "That still doesn't explain how you know my brother's medical history," Julia pressed, refusing to let it go. Vincent opened his car door. "Upstairs. We are not having this conversation in a garage." Julia had no choice but to follow. She was flanked by 2 stone-faced bodyguards as they entered a private elevator. Vincent pressed a biometric scanner, and the car shot upward, skipping all floors until it reached the penthouse. The doors parted to reveal a sprawling, minimalist apartment wrapped in floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic, breathtaking view of the Manhattan skyline. It was beautiful, cold, and entirely untouchable, just like its owner. Vincent walked straight to a sleek, marble-wet bar. He retrieved a crystal decanter and poured a generous measure of Macallan 25-year-old Scotch into 2 glasses. He walked back, offering one to Julia. She stared at it, but didn't move. Vincent set the glass on a glass coffee table. "Drink it. You're in shock." He took a slow sip from his own glass before settling into a low leather armchair, fixing his dark, unreadable gaze on her. 7 months ago, Vincent began softly, the ice clinking in his glass. Lower East Side. A Tuesday. It was raining heavily. Julia frowned, her mind racing. A man was left for dead in an alley behind Katz's Delicatessen, Vincent continued, his voice dropping an octave. He had taken a 9mm hollow point round to the lower abdomen. It was a professional hit orchestrated by a rival faction trying to seize the Brooklyn ports. The man was bleeding out against a dumpster. He was minutes away from losing consciousness, and inevitably, his life. Julia's breath hitched. The memory slammed into her. She had been walking home from a grueling double shift at her old diner. She remembered the dark alley, the horrifying amount of blood mixing with the rain, and the man slouched in the shadows. "You found him," Vincent said, his eyes locking onto hers. "You pulled your phone out to call 911. But the man begged you not to. He told you the police precinct in that district was compromised, bought and paid for by the men who shot him. If the sirens came, his enemies would know where to finish the job." I used my scarf," Julia whispered, her hands trembling as she touched her own neck. "I pressed it against the wound. I called a burner number he gave me, and I waited with him until a black SUV arrived." "You ruined a perfectly good cashmere scarf," Vincent noted, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "And when my men loaded me into that SUV, you disappeared into the rain. You didn't ask for a reward. You didn't give your name. You just vanished." Julia stared at the Mafia Boss in sheer disbelief. That was you? In the alley?" "I look quite different without a tailored suit and 3 pints of blood missing," Vincent said dryly. "It took my intelligence network 4 months to track you down through street cameras and transit records. When I finally found out who my angel-in-the-wool coat was, I had my attorney, Arthur Idala, you might have heard of him, look into your background. I wanted to write you a check. But then I found out about Leo." Julia's defensive walls immediately flared up. "You looked into my private life?" "I looked into everything," Vincent said unapologetically. "I know that your parents passed away 3 years ago. I know you dropped out of NYU to take care of Leo when he was diagnosed. And I know that his current chemotherapy isn't working, and you are $70,000 short for the experimental CAR T-cell therapy at Weill Cornell." Tears pricked Julia's eyes. The sheer exhaustion of her life, the constant, crushing weight of medical bills and impending grief, suddenly threatened to crush her. "Why does that matter to you?" "Because in my world, Julia, a debt of life is absolute," Vincent said, standing up. He closed the distance between them, his presence overwhelming, yet strangely grounding. "You saved my life in that alley. Tonight, through sheer fate and a clumsy shoe, you saved it again. Cosa Nostra demands balance. You are under my protection now." "I don't want mafia protection," Julia said, her voice shaking but defiant. "I just want my brother to live." "And he will," Vincent promised, his voice a low, soothing rumble. "The $70,000 was wired to Weill Cornell's oncology department 20 minutes ago, while we were in the car. Dr. Aris is preparing Leo's transfer to their private VIP wing as we speak. It's done, Julia." Julia's knees finally gave out. The sheer relief, the removal of a boulder she had been carrying for years, was too much. She collapsed toward the floor, but Vincent caught her. His strong arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her against his chest. For a man so feared, his hold was incredibly gentle. He guided her to the sofa, letting her cry into his ruined shirt. "Breathe, Julia," he murmured, his hand resting on the back of her head. "The war you've been fighting alone, it's over. I am fighting it for you now." The peace of the Tribeca penthouse was shattered an hour later. Vincent's encrypted cell phone vibrated violently on the marble counter. He answered it, his expression hardening into a mask of pure lethality as he listened to his lieutenant, Dominic. "Speak," Vincent commanded. "Boss, Volkov is panicking." Dominic's gravelly voice came through the speaker. "He knows the poison failed. He knows you took the waitress. His spotters saw the plaza kitchen staff being questioned. Volkov thinks the girl is an inside asset of yours. He sent a cleanup crew to Mount Sinai to use the brother as leverage." "Julia," who had been wiping her eyes on the sofa, froze. "Leo," she gasped, absolute terror seizing her heart. Vincent didn't look at her. His eyes were entirely black with rage. "Are they at the hospital, Dominic?" "They tried," Dominic chuckled darkly. 4 Russians in scrub jackets stepped off the service elevator on the 4th floor. We handled it quietly. No gunshots. Sedatives and zip ties. They're currently taking a ride in the back of a medical waste truck toward the East River. But Volkov is burning the city down looking for you. "Let him look," Vincent said. "Initiate the blackout protocol on Volkov's shipping lines. Call the union bosses. Nobody moves a single crate in Brooklyn until Volkov is handed to me. And Dominic?" "Yeah, boss." "Get the armored transport to Mount Sinai. Move the boy to Weill Cornell now. I want him under armed guard in the private wing." Vincent hung up the phone and turned to Julia. "Get your coat," Vincent said softly. "We're going to see your brother." The drive to the Upper East Side was a blur to Julia. When they arrived at the hyper-secure private wing of Weill Cornell Medical Center, Julia practically sprinted down the immaculate, quiet corridors. She burst into the sprawling private suite. Leo, pale and frail, was sitting up in a massive mechanical bed, watching a massive flat-screen TV. He looked confused but completely unharmed. "Julia," Leo rasped, adjusting his beanie. "What's going on? These giant guys in suits just wheeled me out of Sinai." "Oh, Leo," Julia sobbed, rushing to the bed and burying her face in his shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "It's okay," Leo said, patting her back awkwardly. He looked over Julia's shoulder, his eyes widening as Vincent Moretti stepped into the room. Vincent's imposing frame seemed to swallow the doorway. "Who is that?" Julia wiped her face and turned. She looked at Vincent, the ruthless mafia boss, the killer, the man who had just dismantled a Russian oligarch's empire to keep her safe. "This is Vincent," Julia said, her voice steadying. "He's a friend. He's paying for your new treatment." Vincent offered a stiff, polite nod to the boy. "A pleasure, Leo. You rest up. The doctors here are the best in the world." Vincent stepped back out into the hallway, giving them privacy. Julia stayed with Leo until the nurses administered his medication, and he drifted off to sleep. When she finally stepped out of the room, she found Vincent standing by the massive window at the end of the hall, staring out at the dark expanse of the East River. She walked up beside him. "Dominic said Volkov's men tried to kill Leo. Because of me." "Because of me," Vincent corrected, turning his head to look at her. "In my world, collateral damage is a tragic reality. But I made a vow to protect you, Julia. And the Moretti family does not break its vows." "What happens now?" Julia asked, wrapping her arms around herself. "Volkov is still out there." "Not for long," Vincent said quietly. He checked his Patek Philippe watch. "In about 10 minutes, Dmitry Volkov is going to have a very tragic maritime accident aboard his private yacht off the coast of Staten Island. The police will rule it a malfunction of the boiler. The rival families will understand the message, and your life will go back to normal." "Normal?" Julia scoffed softly, looking up into his dark eyes. "I just rode in a getaway car with a mafia boss, found out my brother's life-saving treatment was paid for with blood money, and I'm standing in a hospital wing guarded by men with concealed weapons. Normal is gone." Vincent stepped closer to her. The raw, terrifying energy that usually surrounded him softened, leaving only the man beneath. He reached out, his thumb gently brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "You're right," Vincent murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips before returning to her eyes. Normal is gone. But you will never have to work a double shift again. You will never have to cry over a medical bill. And you will never, as long as there is breath in my lungs, have to face this world alone. Julia looked at him, realizing the terrifying truth. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was inextricably bound to the king of New York's underworld. And God help her, as he wrapped his coat around her shivering shoulders. She didn't want to leave. She leaned into his chest, the scent of expensive cologne and gunpowder lingering on his skin. "Okay," she whispered into the dark. "Okay." Did you love this thrilling mafia romance? If Julia and Vincent's intense, unexpected love story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button. Share this video with your fellow romance and drama lovers, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heart-pounding, real-life-inspired stories. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a twist. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you were in Julia's shoes?